The year was 2247, and Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Valkyrie, watching the stars drift past the main view screen. His ship was a heavy cruiser, one of humanity's finest vessels, patrolling the outer edges of human territory. It had been 30 years since Earth joined the Galactic Council, and humanity was still proving itself to the older civilizations that ruled the stars. Jake was a tall man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor that his crew trusted completely. He had served in the human fleet for 15 years, working his way up from a junior officer to his current command. Behind him, his bridge crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she monitored nearby space for threats. She was young, but deadly accurate with weapons systems, and Jake knew she could outshoot anyone in the fleet. Chief Engineer Marcus Wright was down in the engine room, keeping the Valkyrie's powerful reactors running smoothly. The man was a genius with machinery, able to coax performance from systems that should have failed hours ago. At the communications station sat Lieutenant Nicole Palmer, a woman with quick reflexes and sharper instincts. She wore a headset and monitored dozens of frequencies at once, listening for anything unusual in the vast emptiness of space. Nicole suddenly straightened in her chair, her hand moving to adjust her headset. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange. It's faint, but it's definitely a distress signal." Jake moved to stand behind her station. "Where is it coming from?" "The Kashari system. Sir, about 6 light-years from our current position." Nicole worked her controls, trying to clean up the signal. Static filled the bridge speakers, then a voice broke through. It was high-pitched and frightened, speaking in the trade language used across the galaxy. "This is Kashari Prime. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. They are killing everyone. Please, somebody help us. We need help. Please." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about the Kashari. They were a peaceful species, bird-like creatures who spent their time creating art and trading goods across the galaxy. They had no military to speak of, no weapons beyond basic defense systems. They were the kind of species that other civilizations protected simply because they posed no threat to anyone. "Can you clean that up anymore?" Jake asked, his jaw tight. Nicole worked for another minute, then shook her head. "That's as good as it gets, sir, but there's something else. The message is being broadcast on multiple frequencies, but one of them is specifically coded for human vessels. They're asking for us directly." Amy turned in her chair. "Sir, the Kashari system is outside our patrol zone. If we go there without authorization, Command will have our heads." Jake knew she was right. There were rules about entering other systems without permission, regulations about where patrol ships could and could not go. But he also knew what those regulations were worth when people were dying. He had not joined the military to follow rules while innocent beings were slaughtered. "How long to reach the Kashari system at maximum speed?" he asked. Marcus's voice came through the intercom from engineering. "I can push the engines hard, Commander. Get us there in 4 hours, maybe less." Jake looked at the view screen, then at his crew. He saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his chest. These were people who understood what it meant to do the right thing, regardless of the cost. "Set course for Kashari Prime. Maximum speed. Nicole, send a message back to Fleet Command. Tell them we received a distress call and are investigating. Then send another message to the Kashari. Tell them help is coming." The Valkyrie turned in space, its engines flaring bright as Marcus pushed them beyond their normal limits. The ship leaped forward, racing toward a system where people were dying and crying for help. During the 4-hour journey, Jake gathered his senior officers in the briefing room. Amy brought up what intelligence they had on the Kashari system. The main planet was called Kashari Prime, a beautiful world with gentle weather and abundant life. Over 1 billion Kashari lived there, along with several orbital stations used for trade and commerce. "Do we know who's attacking them?" Jake asked. Amy pulled up another display. Based on the signal patterns Nicole detected, it looks like Kravik ships. The Kravik Empire was expelled from the Galactic Council 6 months ago for treaty violations. Since then, they've been quiet. Too quiet, apparently. Jake knew about the Kravik. They were a brutal species, predators who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. They were large, heavily muscled beings with thick armor-like skin and a culture built around conquest. The Council had tried to integrate them peacefully, but the Kravik had violated every agreement they made. "How many ships are we looking at?" he asked. Amy shook her head. "Unknown, sir, but if the Kravik are launching a full invasion, it could be a significant fleet." Marcus leaned forward. "Commander, we're just one ship. If there's a whole fleet there, we won't last long." "I know," Jake said quietly. "But we're all they've got right now. The Council will debate and discuss while the Kashari die. By the time they decide to act, there might not be anyone left to save." The officers were silent. They all knew the Galactic Council's reputation for moving slowly, for letting politics get in the way of action. It was one of humanity's biggest frustrations with the galactic government. Humans came from a world that tried to kill them every single day. They understood urgency in a way that species from gentler worlds did not. As the Valkyrie approached the Kashari system, Nicole picked up more signals. These were not distress calls. They were weapons fire, explosions, and the screams of dying people. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, the helmsman announced. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "Amy, I want weapons hot the moment we exit. Marcus, keep those shields at maximum. Nicole, keep scanning for any Kashari survivors and keep that communication line open to Fleet Command." The ship shuddered as it dropped back into normal space at the edge of the Kashari system. What appeared on the view screen made Jake's blood run cold. Kashari Prime was burning. The orbital stations that should have been lit up with trade traffic were now twisted wreckage, tumbling through space, debris fields marked where defensive satellites had once protected the peaceful world, and everywhere there were Kravik ships. Amy's voice was tight as she counted. 27 Kravik vessels, Commander. I'm reading frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and at least 3 battle cruisers. They've got us outnumbered and outgunned." Nicole's console beeped urgently. "Sir, I'm receiving another transmission from the surface. It's from a Kashari elder. He's begging for help. He says the Kravik have landed ground forces and they're massacring everyone they find." Jake stood in the center of his bridge, looking at the overwhelming enemy fleet on his screen. Every tactical instinct told him to turn around and wait for reinforcements. One ship could not defeat 27. The mathematics were simple and brutal. But Jake was not thinking about mathematics. He was thinking about the billion people dying below, about the desperate voice on the communication channel, about the fact that they had asked specifically for human help because they knew no one else would come. "Commander," Amy said softly, "your orders?" Jake looked at his crew. These were good people, people with families and futures. He was about to ask them to fight a battle they could not win. But he also knew that every one of them had joined the military for the same reason he had, to protect those who could not protect themselves. "Nicole, send one more message to Fleet Command. Tell them Kashari system under attack, Kravik fleet present, and that we are engaging." He paused, then added, "Tell them we need immediate reinforcement." He turned to face the view screen, looking at the Kravik fleet that had not yet noticed his small ship at the edge of their sensors. The Kravik fleet responded to Jake's warning with laughter. It came through the communication channel as a deep, rumbling sound that made the bridge speakers rattle. A face appeared on the view screen, a massive Kravik with scarred armor plating and cruel eyes. "I am Warlord Krask, commander of this fleet," the alien said in heavily accented trade language. "You are one small ship making threats against my entire fleet. Are all humans this stupid, or are you special?" Jake did not smile. He did not threaten. He simply gave an order to Amy. "Fire all missiles! Target the nearest battlecruiser!" The Valkyrie shuddered as it launched 32 missiles from its forward tubes. These were not the clean energy weapons that most galactic species preferred. These were human-designed nuclear weapons, each one carrying a fusion warhead powerful enough to crack a small moon. The missiles streaked across space, their guidance systems thinking and adapting like living things. The Kravik battlecruiser tried to defend itself. Its point defense systems opened fire, destroying the first wave of missiles. But human weapons were designed by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The missiles split apart, releasing decoys and countermeasures. Some missiles sacrificed themselves to create openings for others. 6 missiles got through the defenses and struck the Kravik battlecruiser. The fusion warheads detonated simultaneously, and for a brief moment, a new sun was born in the Kashari system. When the light faded, the battlecruiser was gone. There was not even debris, just an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The laughter stopped. Krask's face twisted with rage. "Kill them! All ships, converge and destroy that human vessel!" The Kravik fleet turned as one, 26 warships moving to attack the lone human cruiser. Jake watched them come and felt no fear. He had trained for this his entire military career. Every simulation, every drill, every exercise had prepared him for fighting while outnumbered and outgunned. "Evasive pattern Delta 7, he ordered calmly. "Amy, target the frigates first. Marcus, I need everything you can give me from the engines." The Valkyrie began to move, and the Kravik quickly realized they were not fighting an ordinary ship. Human vessels were built different from other species' ships. They were built to survive in the harsh environment of Earth's solar system, where radiation, debris, and extreme temperatures were constant threats. They were overbuilt, over-armored, and overpowered in ways that seemed wasteful to other civilizations. But now, that design philosophy showed its worth. The Valkyrie twisted through space in ways that violated every safety regulation in the Galactic Council's books. It pulled turns that generated forces which would crush most alien species into paste. But humans came from a heavy gravity world. Their bones were thick and strong. Their organs were protected by layers of muscle and fat, and their bodies could withstand punishment that would kill others. The crew was strapped into acceleration couches, their bodies injected with combat drugs that increased their reaction times and pain tolerance. Amy's fingers moved across her controls with inhuman speed, targeting and firing the ship's railguns. Each shot was a slug of metal accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, and each one hit exactly where she aimed. A Kravik frigate exploded as a railgun round punched through its hull and detonated its reactor. Another tried to dodge and instead flew directly into a spread of missiles. A third frigate died when Amy put 3 railgun shots into the same spot on its armor, punching through to the crew compartments inside. The Kravik were firing back, their energy weapons hammering against the Valkyrie's shields. The human ship shuddered with each hit, but the shields held. When one section weakened, Marcus rerouted power from non-essential systems, keeping the protective barrier strong. "Shield Generator 3 is failing," Marcus reported from engineering, his voice strained. "I'm going to have to physically repair it." "Negative," Jake said immediately. "That compartment is exposed to enemy fire. You'll be killed." "Then we lose the shields and we all die," Marcus shot back. "I'm already on my way." Jake wanted to order him to stop, but he knew Marcus was right. The engineer disappeared from the communication channel, and Jake could only imagine what he was doing. Marcus entered a compartment that was being hit by enemy weapons fire, where radiation levels were climbing into lethal ranges, and began working to repair damaged systems with his bare hands. Any other species would have died within seconds. But Marcus was human, and humans were tough in ways that defied logic. His thick bones protected his organs. His body's natural redundancy meant that even if one system failed, others could compensate. and the radiation that would kill a Kashari or even a Kravik in minutes would take hours to kill a human. After 5 agonizing minutes, Shield Generator 3 came back online. Marcus stumbled out of the compartment, his body trembling from radiation exposure, but alive and already heading to fix the next damaged system. The battle raged for hours. The Valkyrie fought like a cornered animal, using every advantage it could find. Jake ordered his ship into a debris field, using the wreckage of destroyed Kashari stations as cover. When the Kravik followed, he detonated one of their own destroyed ships, using the explosion to hide the Valkyrie's heat signature and position. Amy coordinated the weapons with brutal efficiency. She learned the Kravik firing patterns and exploited every weakness. When a Kravik destroyer left its port side exposed for a fraction of a second, she was ready with a full spread of missiles. When 2 enemy ships moved too close together, she fired railgun shots that missed the first ship intentionally, but hit the second. Nicole monitored enemy communications and fed information to Jake. She heard the Kravik commanders growing frustrated, heard them cursing the human ship that refused to die. She also heard something else. Orders being given to ground forces, telling them to withdraw from the planet's surface and return to their ships. The Kravik were pulling their troops back to deal with the human threat. "Jake," Nicole said quietly, using his first name for the first time in years. "The Kashari on the surface are reporting that the Kravik are leaving. We're buying them time." Jake felt a grim satisfaction. This was why they were here. Every minute the Valkyrie survived was another minute for the Kashari to evacuate, to hide, to live. He looked at the tactical display and saw that 5 Kravik ships were destroyed and 3 more were badly damaged, but the Valkyrie was suffering too. "Damage report," he called out. Amy read from her console, her voice steady despite the dire news. "Hull breaches on decks 4, 6, and 8. We've lost crew in those sections. Forward missile tubes are empty. We have maybe 30 railgun rounds left, and the main reactor is showing stress fractures." Marcus's voice came through, weak but determined. "Jake, the reactor is going critical. We've got maybe 20 minutes before it fails completely. After that, we're dead in space." 20 minutes. Jake looked at the Kravik fleet, still with 18 functional ships surrounding them. 20 minutes was not enough time for rescue. It was not enough time to escape. It was barely enough time to say goodbye, but it was enough time to fight. "All power to forward weapons," Jake ordered. "Amy, pick your targets carefully. Marcus, hold that reactor together for as long as you can. Nicole, keep broadcasting our position to any human ships in range." The Valkyrie pushed deeper into the Kashari system, drawing the Kravik away from the planet. Every shot counted now. Amy fired with precision that bordered on impossible, making each railgun round destroy or cripple an enemy vessel. The crew worked with desperate efficiency, knowing these were their final minutes. A Kravik cruiser exploded as its ammunition stores cooked off. A frigate lost power and began tumbling through space. But the Valkyrie was dying, too. Atmosphere vented from multiple breaches. Fires burned in 3 compartments. The ship was leaving a trail of debris behind it, like blood drops from a wounded animal. Jake felt the ship shudder beneath him, felt the reactor struggling to keep running. He thought about his crew, about the good people who had followed him into this impossible battle. He thought about the Kashari they had saved, about the lives that would continue because of what they had done here. "Commander," Nicole said, and there was something strange in her voice. "I'm picking up new contacts. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace." Jake pulled up the sensor display, expecting to see more Kravik reinforcements. Instead, his heart leapt in his chest. The ships were human. Not just 1 or 2, but dozens. Cruisers and destroyers and carriers, a whole fleet dropping into normal space like the hand of an angry god. "Identify those ships," Jake ordered, his voice breaking slightly. Nicole worked her console, then started laughing. It was a sound of pure relief and joy. It's the fleet, Jake. It's the whole damn fleet. Admiral Lisa Chen is leading them on the UNS Retribution. They got our message. They came. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in a formation that spoke of deadly purpose. 43 warships arranged in a pattern that maximized their firepower while protecting each other. At the center was the UNS Retribution, a dreadnought 3 times the size of any Kravik vessel. Around it flew cruisers, destroyers, and carrier groups loaded with fighters. Admiral Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the tactical display. She saw the battered Valkyrie still fighting, still refusing to surrender even as its systems failed. She saw the Kravik fleet, confident and aggressive. And she felt a cold anger settle in her chest. The fleet had received Jake's distress call 6 hours ago. What should have taken 2 days to organize, they accomplished in 6 hours. Ships were pulled from defensive positions, crews recalled from leave, and the fleet jumped into unknown space without proper reconnaissance. They came because that was what humans did. When someone called for help, you answered. "Open a channel to the Kravik fleet," Lisa ordered. Her communication officer worked quickly, and soon her voice was being broadcast to every enemy ship. "This is Admiral Lisa Chen of the United Nations Fleet. You are ordered to power down your weapons and surrender immediately. This is your only chance." Warlord Krask appeared on the screen, his face still confident despite the arrival of human reinforcements. He looked at the numbers and smiled. "You bring 43 ships against my 23. You have an advantage, yes, but not enough. We Kravik are warriors, bred for battle. We will crush you." Lisa did not argue. She simply turned to her tactical officer. "Launch all fighters. Authorization code Delta 97. What happened next shocked the Kravik. The human carrier groups opened their launch bays, and fighters poured out like angry insects. Hundreds of small craft, each one piloted by a single human in a cockpit. The Kravik stared in confusion. No other species used manned fighters anymore. The G-forces involved in combat maneuvers were too dangerous. Drones and automated systems handled fighter operations for civilized species. But humans were not like other species. Captain Ryan Fletcher sat in the cockpit of his fighter, strapped in tight and connected to his ship through a neural interface. The fighter was more than a machine. It was an extension of his body, responding to his thoughts as quickly as his own limbs. Around him, 300 other pilots prepared for combat. "This is Fletcher to all squadrons. These Kravik attacked peaceful people and thought they could get away with it. Let's show them they were wrong." The fighters accelerated, and Ryan felt the G-forces slam him back into his seat. 3 Gs, then 6, then 9. His vision started to tunnel, blood pooling in his extremities. The fighter's medical systems injected chemicals into his bloodstream, keeping him conscious. His bones creaked under the pressure, but they held. Human bones, built to withstand Earth's heavy gravity, were strong enough to survive. The Kravik point defenses opened fire, filling space with energy bolts. The human fighters danced through the barrage, pulling maneuvers that should have been impossible. Ryan twisted his fighter through a corkscrew pattern, avoiding fire by centimeters. He pulled a turn that generated 15 Gs of force, and he felt something pop in his chest. Probably a rib, he thought distantly. The medical system flooded him with more drugs, dulling the pain. He locked onto a Kravik destroyer and fired his missiles. The weapons streaked across space and slammed into the enemy ship's engine section. The destroyer shuddered but kept fighting. Ryan armed his mass driver and dove straight at the target, firing as he went. Slugs of depleted uranium punched through the destroyer's armor, and he saw atmosphere venting from the holes. His ammunition counter hit 0. The destroyer was damaged but still fighting. Ryan made a decision that other species would consider insane. He aimed his fighter directly at the destroyer's damaged section and pushed his engines to maximum. "Fletcher, what are you doing?" his wing commander shouted over the communication channel. "Finishing the job," Ryan said calmly. At the last second, he ejected from his fighter. The small craft slammed into the destroyer at incredible speed, punching through the weakened armor and detonating deep inside the ship. The destroyer broke apart, its reactor exploding. Ryan's ejection pod tumbled through space, and he watched as other pilots made similar choices. When their weapons ran out, they turned their fighters into missiles. They sacrificed their expensive craft without hesitation because lives were more important than machines. The Kravik watched in horror as human pilots deliberately crashed into their ships, taking them down through sheer determination. Meanwhile, the human capital ships moved into position. Admiral Lisa Chen did not order a direct assault on the Kravik flagship. Instead, she did something that confused the enemy. She targeted their support vessels. "All ships, fire on coordinates I'm transmitting," Lisa ordered. "Destroy every supply ship, every tender, every transport. Leave the warships for last." Her fleet obeyed, and the Kravik support vessels began dying. These ships carried fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and food. They were the logistics that kept a fleet functioning. The Kravik warships watched as their ability to sustain operations vanished in fireballs and expanding debris clouds. "Admiral, the Kravik are demanding to know why we're not fighting their warships," the communication officer reported. "Tell them it's because we're not fighting a battle," Lisa said coldly. "We're fighting a war." The Kravik did not understand. They came from a culture that valued individual combat, ship versus ship. But humans came from a world where survival meant thinking long-term, planning ahead, and understanding that winning today meant nothing if you could not sustain yourself tomorrow. Lisa was not just defeating the Kravik fleet. She was ensuring they could never threaten anyone again. Captain Ryan Fletcher's example inspired a coordinated attack. 6 destroyers under his command moved together with perfect synchronization. Their AI systems were networked, sharing information and creating overlapping fields of fire. They moved like a pack of wolves, isolating Kravik ships one at a time and tearing them apart. The destroyer UNS Horizon led the formation, with Fletcher commanding from his backup bridge after being recovered by a search and rescue shuttle. His ship had lost its forward weapons in an earlier engagement, but he used that to his advantage. He moved his damaged destroyer close to a Kravik cruiser, making it look like an easy target. When the enemy focused fire on him, his 5 companion ships appeared from behind a debris field and opened fire on the cruiser's exposed sides. The Kravik cruiser tried to turn, but human coordination was too good. It died in seconds, overwhelmed by massed railgun fire. Fletcher's pack moved to their next target, hunting with deadly efficiency. Not every engagement went perfectly. The destroyer UNS Ajax took a direct hit from a Kravik battlecruiser's main gun. The entire front half of the ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. 90% of the crew died immediately, but the remaining 10%, trapped in the aft sections, refused to quit. Lieutenant Kevin Parker found himself in command, the highest-ranking survivor. He had no working engines, no shields, and limited life support. The Ajax was tumbling through space, spinning like a thrown coin. But he still had 3 railgun turrets in the aft section, and they still had ammunition. "Anyone who can hear me, report to the aft railgun positions," Kevin ordered over the internal communication system. "We're not done yet." 12 crew members made it to the guns. They manually aimed the turrets, using backup systems and their own eyes to target enemy ships. The Ajax tumbled through space, but every time it spun to face a Kravik vessel, the humans fired. They could not aim precisely, so they simply fired at anything they could see. One of their shots, fired almost randomly as the ship spun, hit a Kravik frigate's reactor. The enemy ship exploded, and the Ajax tumbled on, its crew cheering weakly over the communication channel. They fired until their ammunition ran out, until their life support finally failed, until the cold of space claimed them. But they died fighting, and they took an enemy ship with them. The Kravik fleet began to break. Ship after ship tried to escape, but Admiral Lisa Chen had positioned her forces perfectly. Every escape route was blocked by human vessels. The Kravik realized they were surrounded, caught in a trap with no way out. Warlord Krask's confidence finally shattered. He saw his fleet being systematically destroyed, saw human ships that refused to die even when crippled, saw pilots who turned themselves into weapons rather than retreat. He understood, too late, what he was fighting. These were not just another species. These were Deathworlders, people who came from a planet that spent every moment trying to kill them. They had survived poisonous air, crushing gravity, extreme temperatures, and countless diseases. They had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain through pure determination, and they had brought that same indomitable will to the stars. "All ships," Krask said, his voice defeated. "Stand down. Power down weapons." But some Kravik captains refused. 8 ships tried to fight their way out, still believing they could win through pure aggression. They learned the final lesson about humanity. Humans did not just fight hard, they fought smart. The 8 Kravik ships found themselves targeted by every human vessel in range. Dozens of ships opened fire simultaneously, and the Kravik were erased from existence in seconds. It was not a battle. It was an execution. 15 Kravik ships surrendered, their crews shocked and beaten. The Kashari system was free after 90 minutes of combat. But the cost was heavy. 7 human ships were destroyed completely, including the Ajax. 12 more were so badly damaged they would never fight again. Human casualties numbered in the human fleet transformed from warriors to rescuers in minutes. Medical ships that had jumped in with the combat vessels deployed to Kashari Prime's surface. Teams of doctors and medics, trained on a world where injuries that would kill other species were considered treatable, worked around the clock to save Kashari lives. Lieutenant Commander Brandon Hayes led one of the rescue teams. He was a stocky man with a calm demeanor that helped keep people focused during chaos. His team landed their shuttle in the remains of a Kashari city, where buildings still burned from Kravik bombardment and the air was thick with toxic smoke. The Kashari survivors, they found, were in terrible shape. Many were injured, all were terrified, and some were so traumatized they could barely move. Brandon and his team worked quickly, setting up a field hospital in the ruins of what had been a school. They treated burns, broken bones, and worse injuries that the Kravik had inflicted during their occupation. A young Kashari named Preshka watched in amazement as Brandon entered a collapsed building to rescue survivors trapped inside. The structure was unstable, fires burned in multiple sections, and toxic gas leaked from damaged industrial equipment. Any Kashari who entered would die within minutes, but Brandon simply put on a breathing mask and walked in. 20 minutes later, he emerged carrying 2 injured Kashari, one under each arm. His clothes were singed, his hands burned from hot metal, but he was grinning. "Found 6 more inside. They need immediate medical attention, but they'll live." Preshka could not understand how the human survived conditions that should have killed him. Brandon noticed the confusion and explained while wrapping bandages around his burned hands. "I'm from Earth. Compared to home, this is actually pretty mild. Earth's atmosphere has more toxins, the gravity is heavier, and everything there tries to kill you. This is just another day for us." The rescue operations continued for days. Human teams went places that other species could not, working in environments that would incapacitate regular rescue workers. They pulled survivors from rubble, treated injuries that Kashari doctors said were untreatable, and brought hope to a people who had thought themselves abandoned. On the planet's surface, Admiral Lisa Chen walked through a refugee camp that her forces had established near the capital city. Thousands of Kashari sheltered here, their homes destroyed and their lives shattered. She stopped to speak with survivors, offering what comfort she could. An elderly Kashari named Teshkra approached her. His feathers were burned and broken, and his eyes carried the weight of terrible things witnessed. Through a translator device, he asked the question that many Kashari were wondering. Why did you come? The Galactic Council abandoned us. They said intervention would be politically complicated. They chose politics over our lives. But you came. You died for us. Why? Lisa looked at the elderly Kashari, at the suffering in his eyes, and gave a simple answer. Because you asked for help. That's enough. Teshkra began to cry, and Lisa put a gentle hand on his shoulder. The moment was recorded by a journalist who had embedded with the human fleet. The video was transmitted throughout the galaxy within hours, and the response was immediate and intense. Some species praised humanity's courage and moral clarity. They called the intervention a return to the Galactic Council's founding principles. Others criticized what they called reckless Deathworlder aggression. They demanded that humans be sanctioned for unauthorized military action. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss humanity's actions. Meanwhile, the damaged Valkyrie was towed to a human mobile shipyard. Jake Morrison woke up in the medical bay, his body covered in regenerative bandages. His wounds were serious but not life-threatening. Humans were hard to kill, even when they tried their best to get themselves killed. His crew had survived, though all carried injuries. Amy Rodriguez lost her left arm below the elbow when a console exploded during the battle. The doctors fitted her with a prosthetic replacement that she claimed was better than the original. She could adjust its grip strength and reaction speed, making her even more effective at her job. Marcus Wright's radiation exposure meant he would need gene therapy for the rest of his life. The radiation had damaged his cells at a fundamental level, and without regular treatment, the damage would eventually kill him. But Marcus joked that it was worth it. I got to punch a Kravik fleet in the face. Best trade I ever made. Nicole Palmer brought Jake a data pad showing news feeds from across the galaxy. The battle for Kashari was being discussed everywhere. Some called it the 6-hour stand, others the Deathworlder intervention. Images of the Valkyrie, battered but defiant, holding off an entire fleet had become famous. Human military recruitment had increased 500% in just 3 days. But not all the news was positive. The Kravik Empire, humiliated by their defeat, was calling for war against humanity. Several neutral species were demanding that humans be expelled from the Galactic Council for warmongering behavior. There were concerns that humanity's display of military power had frightened the more peaceful species. Jake read through everything, then asked Nicole for one specific piece of information. How many Kashari did we save? Nicole smiled, a genuine expression of joy. The planetary population before the attack was 1.2 billion. Current survivors are estimated at 900 million. If we had not engaged when we did, analysts say the Kashari would have faced total extinction within 72 hours. Jake closed his eyes and nodded. 900 million lives. That was what they had fought for. What his crew had been willing to die for. Then it was worth it. The scene shifted to the Galactic Council chambers, a massive structure orbiting a neutral world. Representatives from 47 species gathered to discuss humanity's actions. The chamber was designed to accommodate the various body types and environmental needs of member species. Some delegates sat in standard seats, others floated in zero-gravity sections, and a few existed in sealed environments with custom atmospheres. Kate Morrison, humanity's ambassador and no relation to Jake, stood before the assembled representatives. She was a diplomatic veteran who had spent decades navigating galactic politics. But today she was angry in a way that her staff had never seen before. The Dravik's counselor, speaking for those who opposed human actions, delivered a long speech condemning humanity's unprovoked attack on Kravik forces. He demanded reparations and threatened to have humanity expelled from the council. His species came from a peaceful world with gentle weather, and they viewed violence as barbaric. Kate listened patiently to the entire speech. her face neutral. Then she stood and delivered her response. Her words were calm but carried an edge that made several delegates uncomfortable. You speak of unprovoked attacks. The Kashari sent distress calls for 6 hours before we arrived. They begged for help while your fleet sat in dock, while your diplomats debated, while your politicians worried about complications. 900 million Kashari are alive today because humanity acted while you talked. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from different species. This council was founded on principles: protection of member species, defense of the innocent, justice for the oppressed. But those principles have become words on paper, forgotten whenever acting on them becomes inconvenient. The Dravik's counselor tried to interrupt, but Kate continued speaking. The Kashari sent their distress call directly to humanity because they knew the council would do nothing. They knew that only the Deathworlders would actually come when called, and they were right. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity will not apologize for saving lives. We will not regret standing against genocide, and we will not allow bureaucracy and political convenience to become excuses for cowardice. If that means humanity stands alone, so be it. We have faced worse on our own world every day of our existence. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species applauded, recognizing the truth in her words. Others shouted in outrage, calling her statement an insult to the council. The session devolved into arguments that lasted for hours. Finally, a vote was called. Should humanity face sanctions for the Kashari intervention? The delegates cast their votes, and the tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut. The result appeared on the main display, and Kate felt her heart skip. The motion failed by a single vote. Humanity would not be sanctioned. The deciding vote came from the Vexillian delegation, a species that rarely spoke during council sessions. Their representative, an ancient being that communicated through light patterns, delivered a statement that would be remembered for generations. The Vexillians remember. 300 years ago, our homeworld faced invasion. We sent distress calls throughout the galaxy. We begged for help, and we received only silence. By the time the council decided to act, our homeworld was destroyed and our species reduced to a fraction of its former population. We remember the silence. We remember feeling abandoned. Had humanity existed then, perhaps our world would still be inhabited. We stand with the humans. The chamber fell silent. Many delegates looked uncomfortable, confronted with the council's past failures. The session ended without further discussion, but everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 6 months passed since the Battle of Kashari, and the galaxy was a different place. The changes were both obvious and subtle, touching everything from military doctrine to diplomatic philosophy. Humanity had sparked something that could not be put back in the bottle. The Kravik Empire, their military shattered and their leadership discredited, sued for peace. The negotiations were held on a neutral station, with representatives from multiple species observing. The humans led the discussions, and they were not gentle. Kate Morrison sat across the table from the new Kravik leadership. The old warlords had been removed from power by their own people, replaced by more moderate voices. But moderate or not, they would pay for what they had done. The terms are simple, Kate said, sliding a data pad across the table. Full disarmament of your military beyond defense forces. Reparations to the Kashari people for the next 50 years, and council oversight of your government for the next century. Accept these terms, or face continued isolation and sanctions. The Kravik delegate, a younger male named Vosh, looked at the terms with barely concealed anger, but he was smart enough to know they had no choice. These terms are harsh. They are merciful, Kate corrected. Many species wanted to see your empire completely dismantled. Be grateful that humanity argued for a path to redemption. Vosh signed the treaty, and the Kravik threat was neutralized. But the real change was happening elsewhere in the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, reform movements had sprung up. Citizens were questioning why their governments had stood by while the Kashari died. They demanded that the Galactic Council return to its founding mission of protecting the vulnerable. Politicians who had argued against intervention found themselves voted out of office. Military commanders who had refused to deploy were forced to retire. The movement became known as the Moral Awakening, and it swept through galactic society like wildfire. Species that had been passive for centuries suddenly found their courage. The Council passed new resolutions mandating faster response times to distress calls. Defense budgets increased across the galaxy. And most importantly, the culture of inaction was challenged at every level. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the UNS Defiance. It was a state-of-the-art cruiser, built specifically for rapid response operations. The ship was faster than the Valkyrie, better armed, and designed with the hard lessons learned from the Kashari battle. But what made Jake most proud was his crew. Amy Rodriguez stood at the tactical station, her prosthetic arm moving with fluid grace as she ran system checks. Marcus Wright was in engineering, his gene therapy keeping him healthy and strong. Nicole Palmer coordinated communications with the same efficiency she had shown during the darkest moments of their battle. They had all insisted on serving together again, refusing promotions and comfortable positions to remain with Jake. They had fought together, nearly died together, and now they would continue serving together. Around them were new crew members, volunteers from across human space who wanted to be part of what people were calling the Guardian Fleet. Admiral Lisa Chen briefed her captains from her office aboard the Retribution. Her face appeared on view screens across 40 ships, with plans to expand to 100 within 5 years. The Guardian Fleet was humanity's answer to the galaxy's moral crisis, a rapid response force dedicated to intervening in humanitarian disasters and defending species that could not defend themselves. Your mission is simple, Lisa told her captains. When a cry for help comes, you respond. Politics, borders, and bureaucracy take a back seat to saving lives. We will operate under council authorization when possible, but we will not let paperwork stop us from doing what is right. You have my full support and the support of Earth Command. It was a radical departure from standard galactic military doctrine. But then again, humans had never been standard. Other species were beginning to contribute ships and personnel to the Guardian Fleet, inspired by human example. The Vexilians sent 3 of their best cruisers. The Kashari, still rebuilding, pledged to send ships once their construction yards were operational again. On Kashari Prime, the rebuilding continued at an impressive pace. The destroyed cities were being reconstructed, but the Kashari were building more than just homes and businesses. They were building a future where they would never be helpless again. The Kashari Defense Academy opened its doors 6 months after the liberation. Human instructors taught courses in tactics, strategy, and combat. The Kashari were a peaceful species by nature, but they were learning that peace must be protected. The first graduating class of Kashari military officers included Preshka, the young Keshari who had watched Brandon Hayes perform miracles during the rescue operations. Preshka stood in her new uniform, addressing the graduating class and their families. Her words were translated into multiple languages and broadcast across the galaxy. We learned a terrible lesson. Peace without strength is just an invitation for predators, but we also learned something beautiful. That strangers will fight for you if you are worth fighting for. That courage exists in the galaxy, and it often comes from unexpected places. We will honor those who saved us by ensuring no species suffers as we did. A memorial was erected in the capital city of Kashari Prime. It was a towering structure of crystal and steel, beautiful and imposing. Carved into its base were the names of every human who died defending their world. The fighter pilots who deliberately crashed into enemy ships. The crew of the Ajax who fired until their last breath. all the brave souls who answered a cry for help from people they had never met. The Kashari declared the memorial sacred ground. Visiting it became a pilgrimage for their species. Parents brought their children to teach them about the day the Deathworlders came. Students studied the battle as an example of sacrifice and courage. And every year on the anniversary, the entire planet observed a moment of silence to honor the fallen. Jake Morrison visited the memorial once, during a diplomatic mission to Kashari Prime. He stood before the wall of names, reading the list of his fellow humans who had given everything. Teshikra, the elderly Kashari who had questioned Lisa Chen, approached him. "Your species gave us more than our lives," Teshikra said through his translator. "You gave us hope. Hope that the galaxy could be better, that principles mattered, that someone would stand against darkness. We will never forget." Jake did not know what to say. He simply placed his hand on the memorial and thought about all the people whose names were carved there. Good people who had done the right thing because it was the right thing, not because it was easy or safe or profitable. On the UNS Defiance, Jake stood in the observation deck during a quiet moment. Amy joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They looked out at the stars, at the vast emptiness of space that was not really empty at all. Out there were billions of living beings spread across thousands of worlds. Some were peaceful, some aggressive, some somewhere in between. "Do you think we really changed anything?" Amy asked. It was a question that Jake had been asking himself for months. Jake pulled up a data pad and showed her the news feeds. Council peacekeepers had intervened to stop a pirate raid on a mining colony, inspired by human example. The Bextari species had announced the formation of their own rapid response fleet, modeled on humanity's Guardian fleet. And there were dozens of diplomatic initiatives aimed at preventing future situations like Kashari. "We did not change everything," Jake said carefully, "but we changed something. We reminded the galaxy that someone has to be willing to stand up, even when it is hard, even when it is dangerous. We showed them that doing the right thing matters more than doing the convenient thing." Nicole's voice came over the intercom, and there was urgency in her tone. "Captain, we are receiving a distress call. It is from the Torvik mining colonies. They are under attack by unknown hostiles. The message specifically requests human assistance." Jake and Amy looked at each other. They had been here before. Another cry for help. Another desperate situation. Another chance to make a difference. The odds would probably be terrible, the danger extreme, and the likelihood of survival uncertain. But that was what they did. That was what humans did. Jake headed to the bridge, Amy following close behind. As they walked through the corridors, they passed crew members securing for combat. Engineers prepped systems, medical staff prepared for casualties, and weapons officers loaded ammunition. Everyone knew what was coming, and no one hesitated. On the bridge, Jake settled into his command chair. His crew moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. These were people from a world that tried to kill them every day of their lives. They survived Earth's poisonous atmosphere, crushing gravity, aggressive wildlife, and countless diseases. They survived because they refused to give up, refused to back down, and refused to let the universe beat them. "Status report," Jake ordered. Amy pulled up the tactical data. "The Torvik colonies are 3 light-years away. They report 5 unidentified ships attacking their mining platforms. Heavy casualties. They say they are running out of time." Marcus's voice came through from engineering. "I can get us there in 2 hours, Captain. Engines are ready for maximum burn." Nicole monitored the communication channels. "I am also picking up signals from other Guardian fleet ships. The UNS Justice and UNS Courage are in the sector. They are changing course to assist, and there are 3 Vexlian ships joining the response." Jake felt a surge of satisfaction. They were not alone anymore. The Guardian fleet was growing, and so was the number of species willing to stand against aggression. The moral awakening was real, and it was spreading. Set course for the Torvik colonies, maximum speed. Nicole, send a message ahead. Jake paused, then spoke the words that were becoming the Guardian fleet's promise to the galaxy. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on. The Defiance's engines flared to life, and the ship leaped toward another desperate battle. Other ships joined the formation, a small fleet of vessels from multiple species united by a common purpose. They would fight together, bleed together, and if necessary, die together. Because that was what the galaxy needed. Not politicians who debated while people died, but warriors who acted when action was needed. The view screen showed the stars stretching as the ship entered hyperspace. Jake looked at his crew, at the good people who had chosen to serve beside him. People who understood that being strong meant protecting the weak, that having power meant using it responsibly, and that hearing a cry for help meant you had an obligation to answer. Captain, Amy said quietly, what if we cannot save them all? It was a fair question. They would not always win. Sometimes they would arrive too late or face odds even humans could not overcome. There would be defeats and losses and painful lessons learned, but that did not mean they should stop trying. Then we save who we can, Jake said, and we make sure that everyone who needs help knows that someone is listening, that someone will come, that they are not alone in the darkness. The ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Torvik system. Ahead, they could see the mining colonies under attack. Enemy ships bombarded the platforms, and escape pods drifted through space as colonists fled for their lives. It was another desperate situation, another impossible battle. But Jake was not worried. He had faced impossible before and won. His crew had faced death and survived. And now they had allies, other ships, and other species who had learned the lesson that humanity taught. That courage was contagious, that principles mattered, and that doing the right thing was always worth the cost. All ships, this is Captain Jake Morrison, he broadcast to the small fleet. Battle stations. We go in together, we fight together, and we make sure these colonists survive. Show them what the Guardian fleet stands for. The ships moved forward as one, weapons charging and shields at maximum. The enemy vessels detected them and turned to engage. But the attackers were about to learn what happened when you threatened innocent people while humans were watching. Nicole spoke the words that would be transmitted across the galaxy, words that would become a promise and a warning. This is the Guardian fleet. We are coming. No one fights alone. The battle began, and Jake smiled. This was what they were meant to do. This was humanity's purpose among the stars, not to conquer or dominate, but to protect, not to frighten, but to inspire, not to stand above, but to stand beside. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and they would keep answering, for as long as anyone needed help. The galaxy would never be perfect, would never be completely safe or fair or just. But it would be better because someone was willing to fight for it. As the Defiance dove into battle, Jake thought about the path that led them here. From one desperate transmission in the Kashari system to a fleet dedicated to protecting the innocent. From a galaxy that ignored cries for help to a galaxy learning to respond. From humans standing alone to humans standing with allies who shared their values. They had changed the galaxy. Not completely, not forever, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to save lives. Enough to give hope to those who had none. And that, Jake realized, was worth everything. Back on Earth, people watched the council proceedings with pride and concern. Pride that their species had stood up for what was right. Concern about what would come next. Would the Kravik declare war? Would other species see humanity as a threat? But there was also something else. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could be better. That principles mattered more than politics. That doing the right thing was worth the cost. On the Valkyrie, Jake Morrison watched the council vote on his datapad and smiled. They had changed something. Not everything, maybe not even enough. But they had reminded the galaxy what courage looked like. They had shown that someone had to be willing to stand up, even when it was hard, even when it was dangerous. Nicole's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, we are receiving another distress call." Jake looked at the datapad, then at the ceiling. Here we go again, he thought. Where is it coming from? Thousands. But the Kashari were saved. 900 million lives continued because humans had answered their call. Admiral Lisa Chen looked at the tactical display, now showing only friendly and surrendered vessels. She thought about the cost, about the good people who had died today, but she also thought about the alternative. If they had not come, if they had followed regulations and waited for council approval, the Kashari would be extinct. "Get rescue teams to all damaged ships," she ordered, "and someone get me a secure line to Earth. Command needs to know what happened here." On the bridge of the battered Valkyrie, Jake Morrison watched as human ships moved in to help. Rescue shuttles headed to his vessel, ready to evacuate his wounded crew. Marcus had collapsed in engineering, his body finally giving out from radiation exposure. Amy's prosthetic arm sparked from damage. Nicole's voice was hoarse from hours of constant communication. But they had done it. Against impossible odds, they had held long enough for help to arrive. Jake looked at his crew and felt fierce pride. These were people who understood what it meant to be human. To fight when fighting seemed hopeless. To stand when standing meant death. To help when no one else would. The Valkyrie's reactor finally gave out, and the lights dimmed. But it did not matter anymore. They had won. The bridge crew erupted in cheers. Marcus laughed from engineering, a sound of exhausted triumph. Amy wiped tears from her face while maintaining her targeting lock on a Kravik destroyer. Jake opened a communication channel to the incoming fleet. "This is Commander Jake Morrison on the Valkyrie. Admiral, your timing is perfect." Admiral Lisa Chen's face appeared on the view screen. She was a stern woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. But she was smiling now, a fierce expression of pride. "Commander Morrison, you have 10 minutes before your reactor explodes. Get your crew to the escape pods. We'll take it from here." "Negative, Admiral. We still have ammunition and we can still fight. Give us 10 more minutes and we'll give you 10 more Kravik kills." Lisa shook her head, but her smile widened. "Stubborn to the end. Very well, Commander. All ships, weapons free. Show these Kravik what happens when they make humanity angry." The human fleet swept into the Kashari system like a storm, and the Kravik were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. "Then broadcast this on all frequencies. I want every Kravik ship to hear it." Jake's voice was cold and hard. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Nations ship Valkyrie. You are ordered to withdraw from Kashari space immediately. This is your only warning." The bridge crew stared at him. One ship against 27, and he was issuing warnings. But then Amy smiled, a fierce expression that showed her teeth. Marcus laughed from engineering. Nicole activated the broadcast with steady hands. They were humans from Earth, from a world that most aliens called a death planet. They had grown up breathing poison air and fighting diseases that would kill any other species. They came from a place where everything tried to kill them, and they had not just survived but thrived. The Kravik wanted a fight. They were about to learn what happened when you made humans angry.